So, we're back to continue our presentation. We'll begin again from the presentation of the audits with regard to the ISM code requirements in the company verification, review, and evaluation process. So, audits. One part of the ISM code concerns certification and verification. In our context, the audit regime to ensure that companies act upon their obligations. In general, audit can be defined as systemic, independent, and documented process for obtaining audit evidence and evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which the audit criteria are fulfilled. It is common to distinguish between first-party audit, or else an internal audit, second-party audit, or else a chartered auditing, while finally a third-party audit with regard to flag state audits performed. The audit criteria are set by policies, procedures, or requirements, while records, facts, or other verifiable information constitute audit evidence. Audits may target various aspects of the audited safety management system, including policies, procedures, practices, programs, and the organization. The certification regime for the ISM code sets forward a sequence of audits conducted by the flag state or a recognized organization, as well as internal audits. In order to be allowed to operate a ship owner or operator initially must possess a document of compliance valid for the specific ship type. This is issued following verification by flag state or the recognized organization that a safety management system consistent with the requirements of the ISM code are in place. The verification process typically consists of an inspection of safety management documents, and one day should audit for OSV operators. A vessel will also need a safety management certificate following an audit verifying that the safety management system contains key characteristics and elements of the ISM code. Internal audits are performed to verify that all required procedures subscribed in the safety management system are in compliance, the company should carry out internal safety audits. The idea behind these internal audits is to discover non-conformities in and fundamental faults with the vessel's safety management system at an early stage and to be able to work out new procedures that are better. The ISM code in section 12 requires that operating companies conduct internal audits to verify that activities on board and ashore are in compliance with the safety management system. This mechanism is considered to have a significant role in the implementation of the safety management system. The procedure for internal audits should, as a minimum, cover responsibilities, competence, and selection of auditors, audit scheduling, preparing and planning the audit, executing the audit reports, and corrective action follow-ups the procedure. The interval between each audit of a vessel or shore administration should not exceed 12 months. Internal audit follow-up should be performed to ensure appropriate corrective actions have been taken and are effective. At any time, the ship owner can be called upon to produce documentary evidence of his internal audits of every area of his system, including the work of the designated person. Further on, with regard to the external audits. The external ISM audit addresses the effectiveness of the safety management system in meeting specified objectives. The guidelines on implementation of the internal safety management code by administration recommends that the general safety management objectives of the ISM code should not be subject to detailed interpretation in assessing conformity to them. The audit criteria should take into consideration whether the SMS complies with the mandatory rules and regulations, taking applicable codes, guidelines, standards into account. The ISM audit covers both organizational issues, like the allocation of resources, and operational issues, like the requirement that procedures, plans and instructions and checklists for key shipboard operations be developed. Many studies have identified several root causes for why audit mechanisms may fail. Taggett et al. Find that audit failures may have 4 systemic causes, of which we can identify unintentional errors by the auditors, deliberate fraud by auditors, financial interests regarding auditors consulting, while finally, undue influence due to personal relations between auditors and clients. In short, they ascribe audit failure to how the auditors have performed their task. In their concept study of auditing in occupational health and safety management systems in Australia, Bluewett and O'Keefe noted 5 additional factors, amongst which failure to allow worker participation, paperwork for the sake of the audit, unintended consequences and potential goal displacement of audit scoring, confusion of audit criteria, and lack of auditor independence and skill. While finally, they thus address a wider set of factors, including attributes of the audit processes as well as their consequences. Moving on to the ISMS code requirements with regard to the certification, verification, and control. Major part in this section is the issuing of the document of compliance, the so-called DOC. Once the ship owner has been satisfactorily audited as complying with the ISM code, he will be issued with a document of compliance by his flag state administration, specifying the types of ships covered and the period for which it applies. The document of compliance is a document certifying, in effect, that he is a fit and proper person to be a ship operator in the light of the safety management policies that he has evolved and is enforcing in relation to himself and each of his ships. Every flag state, or whoever in particular flag state may delegate the responsibility to, will do external inspections to audit the safety management system in connection with the initial certification and then at regular intervals to confirm continuing compliance. Port state control is also likely to carry out external audits. A copy of the document of compliance is always to be on board the ship relevant to it, so that the master, upon request, may produce it for verification by authorities. Shipping company, without either a full term of interim document of compliance, is not allowed to operate the ship types requiring safety management systems. If a document of compliance is removed from a company, then all associated safety management certificates are invalid, and in theory, all vessels must remain in port until the dock is reinstated. The second part of the certification, verification, and control requirement within the ISMS code is the issuance of safety management certificates. Flag state administration will issue to every company and its shipboard management that operates in accordance with the safety management system a safety management certificate specific to a particular ship. To earn a certificate, a company must comply with all the statutory requirements of the state of the ship's flag relating to manning, construction, adaptation, condition and equipment of the entered ship. Γιάννης με πήρε, τον παίρνεις μία. Moreover, it must at all times maintain the validity of all statutory certificates as are issued by or on behalf of the state of the ship flag in relation to such requirements and in relation to safety management system. As with DOC, every flag state will do external inspections to audit the SMS in connection with the initial certification and then at regular intervals to confirm continuing compliance. Moving on to the ISMS code consequences. Consequences of ISM code in practice. Before assessing the consequences of the ISM code, it is best to start with a view on what the reality looks like for ship owners. Ship owners currently cannot just claim that they have met the minimum standards provided by the existing regulatory framework. They have, in effect, to create their own regulatory regime and show that they're complying with it. Say it, do it, and proving should be the motto for the ship owner, because when the ISMS code uses the word should, this really means a must. The code is not a recommendation, while it's not a recommendation, it is mandatory on all accounts. The owner of every vessel required to comply with the ISMS code has to develop an individual safety management system, implement it, verify it, review it, and evaluate it. Yet, the objectives of a ship owner sets have to be achievable through the procedures that are being followed. The ISM code has a mission to squeeze human error out of ship operations. To do this, it must bear down on the owner's system of operation. As a result, the owner's well-established right to rely on the negligence of his crew in the event of an accident giving rise to a claim is challenged. The company now may not land all blame for an occurrence on the master. Section 4 specifically requires the designated person to provide a link between the ship and the highest levels of management, while Section 3.3 requires the company to provide adequate shore-based response and resource in support of the designated person carrying out his function, while Section 9 requires reporting, investigation and analysis of all non-conformities, accidents and hazardous situations. Yet does this lay a presumption that the ship owner is privy to all the designated person finds out or is informed of? It sounds hard, but the code demands the safest possible operation, and its intentions are serious. This makes the company fully responsible for compliance. Therefore, if an accident occurs, the company must determine how they let it happen. Also, the events leading to an accident has to be examined. Primarily, it has to be distinguished if the accident happened due to a result from poor safety management, or it was genuinely accident that came out of the blue. If one of those events has been conditioned by the ISMS code and there is non-conformity, it won't help the vessel when trying to exculpate it. The mere existence of a code which addresses safety management makes clear that a significant amount of hard passes for crew negligence will not be treated as management failure. Before case law has determined the assessment of on the ISM code, it is difficult to say anything but speculations on what the legal consequences will be. The code carries significant legal implications, which interested parties should consider before finalizing their documented safety management systems. The code will leave a paper trail and will be like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it will be a main source of information for insurers, cargo interests, and damaged third parties to build their case on. On the other hand, it will be a great help for ship owners equipped Okay, so the code carries significant legal implications which interested parties should consider before finalize their documented safety management systems. The code will leave a paper trail that will be like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it will be a main source of information for insurers, cargo interests, and damaged third parties to build their case on. On the other hand, it will be a great help for the ship owners equipped with a workable management system to show that they have been due diligent in trying to comply with the code and to make the ship seaworthy. Important fact is that the ship owner should maintain a record of non-conformities, and his doing so should be seen as evidence of compliance with the code, not non-compliance. This is a good indicator on how well run the vessel is. Owners that don't take the ISMS code seriously and install a safety management system that barely gives them the necessary dock and SMC to be able to trade just above the limit will probably run a higher risk of being found with non-compliances. If it is found that the vessel's safety management system is not in compliance with the ISM code, despite the fact that she has a safety management certificate, it will be up to the owner to make a correction. This will probably happen not too seldom, and in the reality this is why we have the ISM code, to discover non-conformities before an incident happens, while giving the owner a possibility to correct them and rectify them, improve the system to preclude reoccurrence. If non-conformity is found after an internal audit, it is up to the owner to immediately give it the appropriate corrective action, while if found by authorities, again, they should give the owner a chance to correct it, depending on how serious the non-conformity is. After the code came into force, any ship required to comply with the ISM code and to hold a safety management certificate has to fulfill this requirement to be allowed to trade. In other words, she may not sail if it's not fulfilled. Practically, this means that she will run into problems with the port chain control, which is either prohibited entry to or departure from a port. Courts, P&I clubs, underwriters, and others involved to try to find a balance when assessing vessels and vessel owners. They should not just reject a prudent ship owner and turn him down. Instead, they may help him as much as they can and encourage him to avoid non-conformities in the future. Everybody in the world of transport, from customers to banks and every stakeholder involved, is expected to play their part in putting pressure on ship owners and to show them the advantages of the ISM code. One of the many examples is BIMCO, that implemented an ISM code requirement clause in their standard charter party. Compliant ship owners that spend time, efforts, and large sums of money to be compliant should be the only ones allowed trading. Another similar example is the Panama Canal, where all relevant vessels ISM compliance is expected. Moving forward to the consequences of ISM code after the occurrence of an accident. If a non-conformity is found after an accident, it must be reported, investigated, and analyzed. The root cause of an incident can be determined and an effective corrective action applied to ensure the repetition is avoided on that ship and prevented from occurring on other ships in the fleet. A ship owner with excellent history of compliance, with very little non-conformity, will probably not be too affected and should have a chance to be treated as a prudent ship owner he is. Of course, if deliberate or for a second time the same non-conformity occurs, the ship owner should be treated tougher. Towards this end, it is important to prevent the enticement of covering non-conformities in order to give ship owners a fair chance to run an honest business. Since all ship owners will have non-conformities at some point, it is vital that they communicate them to give others a chance to avoid them in the future. Consequences of ISM code with regard to limitation of liability. What the consequences of the ISM code will be on the owner's possibilities to limit their liability mainly depends on how much aware was the ship owner with regards to the observed non-conformity and what measures did he undertake to rectify it. However, it is clear that since the enforcement of the ISM code requires management arrangements to be more transparent and increasingly subject to regular scrutiny than hitherto, and this exposes owners to a greater risk of challenging the right to limitation of liability. Additionally, the appointment of a designated person with access to the highest level of management and with express duties to oversee safety and pollution prevention aspects of the operation on each ship of the company makes it harder for the ship owner to claim limitation of liability. Finally, it is always interesting to see how the ship owner responds on the presumption of privity laid in the code. For a ship owner to reject the presumption of privity, he must argue that his reporting system is defective or inefficient. Even after proving that, however, he might still not get the limitation of liability. While also in such a case, if the reporting system is defective or inefficient, then the safety management system is not working and the owner is found to be responsible for a safety management system with non-conformity, risking in such a way to lose his safety management certificate or document of compliance. Further on, the consequences of ISM code on the seaworthiness and detention are presented. With regard to seaworthiness, ISM code states that the obligation to provide a seaworthy vessel is the same after as before the implementation of the ISM code. The same criteria are required, while also the evaluations are mostly the same. What happens now, after the enforcement of ISM, is that authorities have full access to the systems implemented in order to jointly determine the seaworthiness of the vessel under the contract of affreightment. Since seaworthiness is a relative and flexible term and varies according to the nature of the voyage and assignment, there must be times when a vessel is regarded as seaworthy and others when she is not, with the same non-conformity. Yet a non-conformity with a vessel's safety management system is always a non-conformity. With this fact in mind, does this mean that from now on every non-conformity will render the vessel unseaworthy? Surely not. However, it will depend on the type of non-conformity. Generally, for serious nonconformities, the vessel can be rendered instantly unseaworthy, while in circumstances of minor seriousness, the seaworthiness is usually not affected. However, it is an absolute requirement for the ship owner to provide a seaworthy vessel. While with regard to detention or entry refusal to a port, many ports, mostly in the USA and Western Europe, have been very definite in stating that vessels not compliant with the ISM's code will not be let into their ports and will be turned away. Otherwise, such a vessel will be detained if it does not have the right compliance documentation. Port State Control may inspect the ship, which, if found in non-compliance with the requirements of the ISM code, it can be detained. Usually, under such circumstances, the flag is alerted, and if deficiencies warrant the safety management certificate removal, the latter is removed by the flag and the vessel is required to be re-audited. However, in such occurrences, the time lost and primarily the cost of recertification is sufficient and significant in order to make ship owners compliant with the code. With that in mind, no shipper will risk a delay, and probably they won't send their cargoes on such ships as well. A very useful tool to oversee the correct implementation and compliance with the ISM code is Port State Control, which, as long as it's given the necessary means and support, Port State Control can be rendered as one of the most important authorities safeguarding and contributing significantly to the progress of maritime safety. With regard to the so far acceptability of the ISM code, the commitment of the top management is referred to as one of the main requirements and priorities for a successful implementation of a safety management system. Anderson, in 2003, in a study of 2003, recognized that some companies prefer short-term profits at the expense of maritime safety. In accordance with the above, the Paris MOU reported in the result of the concentrated inspection campaign focused on the functioning of the ISM code that 176 ships were detained due to serious deficiencies against the requirements of the ISM code. The reason for these detentions was a serious neglect of the maintenance of the ship and its safety equipment. The state of emergency preparedness was poor as well. The report of the Paris MOU concluded that the top management of the poorly performing shipping companies were not committed to safety issues at all. While Hahn et al. In 1999 analyzed the prevailing security culture in the late 90s. The purpose of the study was to pinpoint the problematic areas encountered with the implementation of the ISM code. Researchers came to the conclusion that the main obstacle to the successful implementation of the ISM code was the widespread resistance by the seafarers to the obligatory establishment of a safety culture. According to Hahn, the maritime industry was not ready for the ISM code at that time. Enforcement of the IS codes with regard to deficiencies and success factors. Poon discovered the problems and difficulties which have appeared in the implementation phase of the ISM code. The most difficult and probable problems were, among others, resistance to change, lack of human resources, insufficient knowledge of procedures, lack of interdepartmental communication, low level of education, frequent staff turnover, while also time pressure to obtain registration of safety management system. Pan finally considered that these problems resulted from a mismatch between the prevailing organizational culture and the requirements of the ISM code. The culture of the organizations did not support the safety-oriented culture which is required to apply in the ISM code successfully. On the other hand, Anderson, in a study of 2003, also identified the success factors of a very well-functioning safety management system requiring leadership and commitment from the top management, a sense of ownership of the safety management system for the personnel, good communication between ships and office, while finally the reduction of paperwork to manageable levels. Overall, some benefits and with regard to benefits and drawbacks of the ISM code, we could distinguish among the benefits that the ISM code has enhanced maritime safety and protection of the marine environment considerably, that it is a reliable management tool if utilized and used properly. It is effective in reducing accidents and damages if used properly. Risks are assessed and sensible precautions are taken when used sensibly. It helps increase awareness and compliance with rules and regulations. It improves and enforces safety consciousness and improves management skills of personnel. It also improves cooperation and communication between the shore and seaboard personnel and between personnel on board, while also sets formal requirements for the company. On the drawback side, we can distinguish the burden of bureaucracy and the complicated documentation of the management system, lack of guidance for the implementation of the code, very scarcely time and resources are diverted from the principal purpose of carrying cargo profitability, non-uniform interpretation of the code's requirements by the participating member states and the companies, too many rules and regulations directed to poorly trained personnel, communication language among the personnel on board and the shore because of the many ethnicities participating and working in the shipping industry, while also the lack of proper training needs are rarely reported, while finally lack of proper safety management system, monitoring and superficial evaluation. Moving to the ship inspection section and the description of the new inspection regime. Ship inspections. Port state control is the right of a port or coastal state to conduct safety inspections and to enforce the international measures on ships that visit its port. An inspected ship that is found to fail the minimum standard is detained and the deficiencies have to be rectified before the ship is released. In some cases, a ship can even be banned from re-entering ports if it has been detained several times. Ship owners wish to avoid detention as it bears high economic costs and it may increase future inspection rates. Port state control inspections are focused not only on safety measures but progressively also on environmental protection. Today, there are 10 port state control regimes operative that cover all coastal areas and that enforce international standards. The regimes are grouped by regions and countries which have agreed to conduct inspections in a harmonized way based on the so-called Memoranda of Understanding. All regimes use the same kind of information to decide with varying levels of sophistication whether a ship should be inspected or not. Each regime uses only its own past inspection data to target ships for inspections, thereby ignoring not only the inspection outcomes of other regimes, but also industry vetting inspections, which are primarily performed on dry bulk carriers and tankers. Apart from the previous inspection results in the same region, other risk factors include ship particular data like the type, age and size of the vessel, its flag state, its classification society, and sometimes its document of compliance company. In all regimes, however, high-risk vessels are tankers and passenger vessels due to the potentially high cost in case of an accident. The new inspection regime of the Paris MOU. The new inspection regime of the Paris MOU on port state control entered into force in the 1st of January 2011. The new inspection regime replaced port state control in 27 countries across Europe that are part of the Paris MOU cooperation on port state control. Since its enforcement, the targeting system for selecting ships for inspections changed based on regulations by the European Commission. An important element in the new inspection regime is the ranking of companies according to their port state control performance. With the introduction of a new inspection regime, the Paris MOU changes its target of inspecting 25% of individual ships calling at each member state, a shared commitment for full coverage of inspecting all ships visiting ports and anchorages in the Paris MOU region as a whole. Also, as of January 1st, 2011, ships are required to send reports electronically to national maritime directorates using the ship reporting system SafeCNet, which will be administered by each national coastal administration. The new inspection regime features improved targeting for the improved targeting for selecting, putting parameters based on assessment risk on which ship will be inspected, provides less flexibility for member states in selecting ships for inspections, as it lays down specifically which ships are first priority or second priority in order to be inspected. It sets regional commitments versus national commitments, as port state controls now, after the adoption of the new inspection regime, do not operate on themselves on their own, but commit to an even larger coalition, in which includes the 27 port state controls of the European Union. So each port state control must commit to broader aims and goals that correspond to the common goal of the inspection regime. Additionally, further refusal of actual provisions is expanding, banning for multiple detentions from certain ship types to all ship types. Further on, it features benchmarking of flags, ROs and companies with inspection intervals to company and RO's performance, while finally it features a widened scope from ports to ports and anchorages with regard to full coverage of ships visiting the MOU region. The new inspection regime with regard to the ship risk profile. The target factor will be placed by the ship risk profile. The ship risk profile classifies ships into low-risk ships and high-risk ships. If a ship is neither low-risk or high-risk, it is then classified as a standard ship risk. The ship risk profile is based on the following criteria, using details of inspections in the Paris MOU area in the last 3 years. The criteria are the type of the ship, the age of the ship, the performance of the flag of the ship, the performance of the recognized organizations, the performance of the company responsible for the ISM management, the number of deficiencies, as well as the number of detentions. So, which vessels will be characterized as high-risk ships? High-risk ships have weighting points of equal or larger of 5. Ship type: chemicals, gas, oil, bulk or passenger ship. correspond to 2 points. The ship age of a vessel older than 12 years old corresponds to 1 point. VHR, HR and MR to HR flag corresponds to 2 points. MR flag corresponds to 1 point. Very low or low RO performance corresponds to 1 point. Very low or low company performance corresponds to 2 points, while also detention in previous 36 months also corresponds to 2 points. So, according to the previous set standards, an example of a high-risk ship would be a 15-year-old oil tanker with low company performance. Κάνουμε διάλειμμα, παρατέταρτο. Okay, at this point we're gonna make a 15-minute break and we'll be back to continue our presentation.